The agenda this morning, my opening statement would address litigation, intended or unintended consequences, nomination day, events and lists. The third, the responses to the drought situation, Region 9. And last, online access to contribution records, the National Insurance Scheme. Let me start by advising that at the last cabinet meeting, there were no contracts. So for the common part of our agenda today, we would not be presenting contracts for which cabinet granted its no objections. Litigation. It's a matter we have been belaboring over the more recent press briefings, and the reason is rather simple. At the end of the day, this issue of public expenditure management and allegations by the parliamentary opposition of unconstitutional and unauthorized spending by the Minister of Finance continues to plague our society, our media, and in this, the electoral season, we strongly believe that it could be transformed into an electoral issue. This is the unconstitutional expenditure, public funds, a claim made by the parliamentary APNU and AFC. The fact of the matter continues to be the same. The government executed a loan agreement with an international financial institution, and that loan provided a certain sum of money. This loan was a policy-based loan. What does that mean? The government undertakes to implement certain policies, and in this case, it was in the environmental sector, particularly environmental protection. So this policy-based loan saw the government committing to implement, to introduce, to adhere to certain policies on environment and environmental protection, for which the government would receive a certain sum of money. The board of the International Financial Institution approved the loan, and in this case, the funds were disbursed. The funds were disbursed. The opposition moved to the court to block expenditure of those funds. And this move was, as I have said before, totally unnecessary. And I contend, and so do my cabinet colleagues, that it was known to be unnecessary at the time that the opposition moved to the court for litigation. Number one, the allegation that the fund would be spent was a totally meaningless allegation, because for policy-based loans, funds are not spent. The proceeds of the loan was deposited in the consolidated fund, and there it has remained to this day. The policies for which government committed either to put in place, to implement, to adhere to, these policies are being met, these undertakings are being met without expenditure from these proceeds from the international financial institution. What is our point? Our point is that the opposition knew that the funds would be, one, deposited in the consolidated fund, two, that expenditure would not be incurred. And yet, as the AG insists, they sought to abuse the court and take this matter to litigation. Obviously, one explanation is going to court and achieving media attention, achieving highlights in sections of the media, was clearly intended to keep alive this issue of public expenditure management and the opposition allegation that Minister Dr. Ashni Singh was indeed unconstitutionally spending funds from the consolidated fund. Minister Singh gave an undertaking at Cabinet to provide in the greatest details the information that supports my disclosures here this morning, and indeed to go into greater detail on the handling not only of policy-based loans, but also of project loans, which was not a matter that the opposition raised in their litigation. They dealt specifically with this policy-based loan in the environmental sector. Nomination day, events and lists. Cabinet spent quite some time during its last meeting reviewing the entire proceedings that took place on nomination day, Tuesday, the 7th of April, 2015. Cabinet noted that the major political parties that were contending at the May the 11th elections had significant turnout of their supporters. Cabinet equally noted elements of unruly behavior and during the APNU AFC proceedings, and recalled that this is fast becoming a feature of supporters and those who are attracted to events where the APNU, AFC gather and make their lengthy passages through the streets and thoroughfares of Guyana, it is usually associated with disorder, civil disorder, and, as is expected, the private sector, businessmen, have resorted to what is becoming a very familiar course of action. They lock up for the day and secure their premises. This was so unlike the orderly procession of the governing People's Progressive Party Civic as they wended the way from the headquarters in Robb Street to the City Hall location on Avenue of the Republic and Regent Street. More significantly for Cabinet's perspective, however, was the lists. Almost total attention at Cabinet was paid to the two lists. And preliminarily, because these are not official lists, until they would have been so clarified and adopted by GCOM and gazetted. At that point in time, it's official. Up to that point in time, one could compare and contrast what is the submitted list and not the official list. Our comments at Cabinet then dealt with what was submitted. And the People's Progressive Party Civic presented lists of candidates for the 10 regional democratic councils, the geographic MPs in the 10 constituencies, and the national top-up. In this 2015 presentation, Cabinet noted the consistency with prior submissions of lists that address the issue of balance and addressed it the way it has been addressed by the People's Progressive Party over the decades. The list essentially, Cabinet saw, embraced the totality of the diversity that exists in Guyana. Male, females, different ethnic groups, different races, ages, classes, religions, all were represented in appropriate numbers on the list. So unlike the lists submitted by the opposition parties, electoral pact, the APNU and AFC. Up front, Cabinet noted the almost total lack of diversity, particularly with regards to the religions, particularly with regards to gender, and Cabinet actually contended that these lists from the opposition party were so flawed that indeed they were not consistent with our electoral laws. This is a contention of the Cabinet. And it would be up to GCOM to rule competently, as the law provides, on this matter. And of course, to provide the representative of the lists with an opportunity to make corrections prior to the submission of the list as an official representation of this political alliance, the APNU and the AFC. Responses to drought situation in Region 9. Cabinet continued its surveillance of this matter of the low seasonal levels of rainfall that was affecting Region 9, parts of Region 1, and wide expanses in the northeast of Brazil. Following the low levels of rainfall came drought. Associated with the low level and access of water, potable water for households, water for irrigation, for agriculture, came a resurgence in pests. Resurgence in pests that were attacking what little crops that remained minimally affected by the drought conditions. Cabinet had mandated the Civil Defense Commission to coordinate responses that would be led by the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Housing and Water, along with GWI, and the Ministry of Public Works. A report had been provided to Cabinet on the developments so far, and it would seem that the fundamental intervention would be sourcing water from accessible sources, rivers that still flowed and such like, and for that water to be deposited in tractor and trailers in tanks. And those tractors and trailers with the tanks, the rebel, you say black tanks, the black tanks would then traverse the neighboring area and provide water to households and farms therein. The GWI commented that the wells had all dried up, and indeed the water table was so low that shallow wells were at this point inaccessible. They were not providing, they couldn't get to the low levels of water in the aquifers, and so they were of no benefit to the communities where these wells were. And this situation was anticipated to continue as long as rainfall did not take place, and the intervention of distribution of water to villages and areas surrounding accessible sources would have to continue for that duration of time. NIS, National Insurance Scheme, and the online access contribution records. The scheme, and this is in the context of the extended data entry and verification project, a project from June to December of 2014 that ended revealing large number of unallocated contributions for which the scheme had received the money, the contributions, but because of difficulties with names and numbers, had been unable to credit individual contributors with that contribution. The crux of the response was at each local office to identify those unallocated contributions the employers and the likely employees, contributors, that fundamentally called for access to contribution records. And it is in that context that Cabinet understood this move to online access being accelerated and brought into effect on Wednesday during the demonstration at the recently commissioned multipurpose center on Carifesta Avenue. Cabinet was advised that the luncheon was successful, and indeed, once the routines have been addressed, each and every NIS contributor with access to online facilities merely by using their own national insurance scheme number and addressing some security safeguards, which is important, addressing some security safeguards can indeed see online their entire history of contributions to the national insurance scheme. Obviously, this has amplified opportunities, allowing the physical attendance at local offices, which right now is the norm, is the convention. You have to go to a local office to get your contribution records. And indeed, what the law recently amended in 2010 provided for was the scheme providing the current year of contribution. So you or I will obtain the 2015 year of contributions through our employer at the end of 2015. Cabinet deemed this online access another major step in the public awareness component, of the data entry and the verification project. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the matters excuse me, I wanted to bring to your attention, emanating from the cabinet meeting held on Wednesday, the 8th of April 2009. 2015. I will be open to questions, clarifications on my opening statement and on matters of topical interest in any order whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the media, you may proceed by identifying yourself from Media House. Stacy? Vanessa?
Good morning, Dr. Luncheon.
Good morning.
A question off of your initial topics. I understand that there is some imminent persons initiative, they call it, being pursued by the UNDP in relation to the elections. Could you expound on this, bring some clarity on this? Imminent persons initiative by the UNDP?
Yes, I can indeed, because the matter was raised and it does seem that there is an anticipation that there may very well be a need for mediation during this electoral process. It does seem there are those who feel that there would be a need for mediation, which automatically says there may very well be some sort of contention around which an effort of mediation could indeed be beneficial. It is in that context that we are informed through GCOM. We are informed through GCOM of a proposal by the UNDP local office, and I say that guardedly, the UNDP local office here, to what I would say is to buy in, to get a buy-in of an initiative by which eminent Guyanese would form a group of mediators who would then, in the face of some contention of some sort associated with the elections and the electoral process, offer their services as mediators to the contending parties. I must admit that in theory, it does seem to have some merit, but what the administration insists, one, is the procedure ought to be UNDP approaching central government on these matters, UNDP local office approaching central government on these matters instead of an independent original foray to GCOM. Furthermore, the administration contends that this ain't exactly GCOM's cup of tea. GCOM is constitutionally charged in terms of elections with managing elections, and this foray into mediation of possible conflict arising during or as a result of the elections isn't GCOM business. GCOM is constitutionally focusing on management of elections. So where the eminent personalities or eminent persons initiative is concerned, our administration, the PPP civic administration, contends it's misdirected to GCOM in the first place, and it should be brought to the attention of central government, with whom UNDP should and must engage. Thank you.
Dr. Luncheon, Vanessa Noreen again, Conco. A follow-up to Stacey's question. Given that a possible conflict could, regarding the electoral process, let's, for example, if there's a problem with the results, per se, per se. GCOM would be involved in that process, so don't you see the merits of the UNDP going to GCOM itself?
There are two aspects of your question, and one is undeniable. I said there was merit, but I said procedurally. I know and UNDP knows that the foray starts with central government and not with GCOM. That's the first one. And two, that GCOM itself, in the context of its constitutional role of managing the electoral process, indeed to become involved in mediation between conflict among contending parties, it ain't GCOM's business. We feel, and historically this is the way it has been, UNDP or any other stakeholder approaching central government on initiatives of this sort would then be visited with an approval or a non-approval or some sort of response. And on the basis of that response from central government, they would then proceed with their proposed initiative. That's why we're saying this one was misdirected.
Can you say if this proposal came after the UNDP's needs assessment report, and has Cabinet seen that report?
We haven't seen, I am not aware, I have not been presented. As a consequence, I have not presented to Cabinet a report from the UN on its recently concluded electoral needs assessment. I would have to agree with you chronologically. This initiative is of a more recent occurrence, and therefore it logically followed the conduct of the needs assessment. Whether they're linked is another matter.
Any other questions? Oh, Kurt, could you use the microphone, please?
Source, Dr. Luncheon, good morning. Could you say if Cabinet has any indication as to how long more the drought in Region 9 is going to last for, and if the process of transporting the water on by the black tanks is going to be sustained over that period, and at what cost?
I can't give you a cost, but I know there is a commitment as long as the need exists. In my opening statement, I did say this is a seasonal aberration, and we anticipate as long as rain comes, as long as day follows night, this low seasonal rainfall would be overcome by, additional or the expected levels of rainfall. That period, that hiatus, the intervention by central government would have to continue. I am not aware of predictions by Hydromet as to the duration of this seasonal low rainfall. But we know, well, I shouldn't say we know. Maybe we can say we anticipate that the seasonal low rainfall would not be forever. And we can go further and say that the intervention is intended to remain whilst the consequences of the low rainfall are being experienced by those particular areas in Region 9.
Could you use the microphone? Oh, thank you.
Just Archibald Hawk, NCN. Could you say what is Cabinet's view on the recently released GCOM's media monitoring report, one, and two, I noticed that Minister Jennifer Webster is not on the list. Could you give some clarification or a reason why she wasn't on the PP's list?
I'll deal with Minister Webster's exclusion, not inclusion on the list of MPs. That's either from the geographic or from the national top-up, as you noted where she was in 2011. In this case, the President advised us at Cabinet that he had accepted the Minister's submission of or notice of resignation that would be effective on the 30th of April 2015. The President disclosed that in her submission, the Minister indicated that lack of significant improvement on our health situation whilst conducting the fairly rigorous demands of a minister of government, particularly of the sector, human services and social security, it was such that a deliberate decision was made by her, my health, and she opted to pursue getting her health concerns addressed. And that led to the resignation from the office of a minister. As I said, effective from the 30th of April 2015. The media monitoring unit of the GCOM, for the purposes of Cabinet, had produced one component that attracted Cabinet's attention, and that was in reference to statements made at the Babujan, and this was recently, the most recent, the 2015 March event, at which the former president had made remarks condemning racial statements, statements abusive and discriminatory, and had even gone further to contend, had it been done, had it been made by a member of the People's Progressive Party and or PPP civic administration, that person would be looking for a job. I think his exact words, we would kick them out. To Cabinet consternation, the MMU report judgmentally deemed the former president's remarks as racially divisive. Racially divisive. It is from that focus that Cabinet sought clarity from GCOM, because the MMU is still a child of GCOM. GCOM is the parent. GCOM doesn't have MMU operating independent of GCOM. So the intention is to obtain clarity from GCOM as to the statement, the judgment that the former president's remark was racially divisive. I must also include that at that very same time, Cabinet reflected on its actions that had been taken in the face, this time not of judgments, this time of statements captured from TV programs and submitted to the police, submitted to the DPP, submitted to GCOM. about racial discriminatory inciting statements made in Bobis on their television by an APNU AFC coalition member. And it bewildered Cabinet somewhat. It bewildered Cabinet somewhat that this and not this, those incidents did not attract the same level of attention given by this media to this aspect of the MMU report, if they did address it, as opposed or as compared with the attention given to former president's statement. We are awaiting clarification from GICA.
Any other questions? From MTV News Update. With reference to your statement about the former president's statement about the party not encouraging its members to be involved in any racist acts or statements, a candidate that is currently on the submitted list for the People's Progressive Party has been on social media, been making racial statements. Would you say that it's a change now under the different management, or is that it wouldn't be employed because of the change of administration?
Well, I will say this. This disclosure needs to be supported by the facts. And what the former president said is the gospel truth. When you transgress the rules on politically correct behavior, particularly in the context of elections, but in general, your place in the People's Progressive Party is not assured. I won't go so far to say, as he said, we kick them out, but I would concur with the sentiment he sought to create that that kind of behavior is unacceptable. So with the data, with the information, with the facts that you apparently have, I think representation can be made, and if sustained, you should be satisfied that the full action of the People's Progressive Party could be brought against this errant comrade.
Hold on. Is there anyone here, meaning anyone else who would like to ask a question before we go? Okay, good, continue.
Yes, ma'am.
What my colleague said, the person in reference has received much criticism. The daughter of General Secretary of the the PPP. That is the person we're referring to. Will there be concerns of a conflict of interest? Will action be taken given that her father is the General Secretary?
I'm saying, as I repeated, and I will repeat, the facts. I don't believe you would think that it takes an allegation by someone, even a member of the media, to, what should I say, to be the basis for the implementation of those disciplinary procedures against errant party members. Against errant party members. It is the supply and the provision of the facts of the matter. This person has contravened the party. This person is a member of the party. In essence, we are expecting party rules to apply. I think in terms of natural justice, this is the preferred way instead of these allegations that frequently surface, unsupported by facts, but with strident calls for action to be taken against those against whom the allegations are raised.
I have two last things this morning. You talked about the list. There have been allegations, again, about the list reflecting nepotism, your daughter, Mrs. HPS Dr. Children of PPP members. They're saying that, you know, it's a lot of family and friends, it's a family and friends list. How do you defend the list being all you said it was in face of these allegations?
Well, I don't know. I'm a black member of the PPP, and so my daughter on the list addresses two things, gender and race. And the fact that people on the list are related, I think is a supreme, I can't find the right word for it, but with a population of under $1 million, sorry, 1 million people, with a population of under 1 million people, and the submission, there are 7 political parties that submitted at least 21 lists. You have 7 political parties, 10 regional lists, 10 geographic lists, and 1 national top-up list. If you're going to find a way in the law to say sons and daughters and cousins and husbands and wives cannot be on the same list, cannot be in the same party, I don't believe you're going to be reflecting the Guyana reality. You probably got to go to maybe one of those countries with 300 million, 1 billion people to get that level of exclusion, to avoid this notion that there's something inherently wrong about having families in the political process. Everywhere in the world that I know about, families are involved. And it's, in some cases, even hallowed. You're expected to be involved. That's how I'm told dynasties are created.
Any more from the observers?
I did mention that the assessments that had been done by the Carter Center, that had been done by the UN, that had been done by OAS and Commonwealth, I have not, and as a consequence, Cabinet has not been provided with reports of those electoral needs assessment. I did mention before our strong, how you might say, expectation, no, our strong expectation is that the commitment to participate in electoral observer missions would see the presence of CARICOM, would see the presence of the Commonwealth, would see the presence of the OAS, and maybe we are still waiting for confirmation of these, as well as some of the others, like the governments. We wrote South Africa, India, and also the Organization of Islamic Countries, and we are waiting for responses from them.
Okay, let's
go ahead.
Sir, is it safe to say you're saying that the population in Guyana is not sufficient enough for the parties to be able to find candidates? And also, is this what are you saying the incumbent is probably trying to create a dynasty also? Is it safe to say that?
Well, I don't know I said that, but if you think I said that, you probably need to review the transcripts of what the HPS said. I certainly didn't.